I'm Knauer and welcome to Carrie's Kitchen. I was trying to think of something special I could make my husband and I for Valentine's this year, and I told him, why don't we try some French cooking? And he kind of made a face. French food kind of has a reputation of being pretty fancy and, expensive ingredients, and I said, well, let's make French onion soup. French onion soup is great and hearty, and it's got that cheesy layer on top. Who can say no to that? So today we're going to learn how to make French onion soup, and we're going to make it with homemade beef broth. So that'll make it have even more rich flavors than if you buy the pre-cooked stuff at the store. I think you're really going to love it. Are you ready to cook? Our first step is we're going to prepare the beef broth, and really this is a 2-day recipe because making broth takes a lot of time just to let the flavors develop. I'm not planning to make a huge batch this time, so I used a handful of baby carrots and 2 stalks of celery. Doesn't matter how pretty you cut things up here, because we're going to strain the vegetables out later. This is just to help develop more flavor. And I'm going to use 1 small onion. I'm adding some olive oil to the pot, which is already pre-warmed. Then we're going to add our veggies. And you want to cook these just like you do with any recipe until they get just tender. This helps bring out the flavor by pre-sauteing them rather than just going straight to a boil. Now I am adding my beef ribs. These are from a rib roast that I made for Christmas. I did let it pre-thaw. Still has a lot of meat on there and some fat, but I kind of did that intentionally when I saved the bone because I knew it would make good beef broth. Now I'm adding water. You want to add enough so that it clearly covers over the bones and the vegetables. I'm going to use a handful of peppercorns here, whole peppercorns. And you're going to want to put a bay leaf in there too, just to give it some more depth. I'm going to cover that and let it come to a boil, which can take a while depending on the size of your pot. Once it does boil, just want to stir it, make sure everything is mixed in together. Now we're going to turn it down to a simmer. And you're going to let that simmer for 8 hours. You want to keep checking on it and adding more water if necessary, but I don't recommend adding more water during the last 2 hours. Because that will dilute the flavor a little. Now we're preparing the onions for the actual French onion soup. 2 pounds of onions here. These are sweet yellows, but they're not the super sweet ones. If you use super sweet onions, I just feel like the soup is too sweet. I'm quartering them and removing the outer skins at this stage, and then I'm just going to put them all in my food processor, which helps save a lot of time. Now I'm arranging them in here carefully because I still want to get even, thin strips when I process them. You don't want to have really wide chunks. You want it to be kind of consistent. The food processor is great because it helps reduce your eyes from watering up and having to hand cut all those onions. Okay, so I've got my pot ready, and I'm adding 4 tablespoons of butter. Let that melt.
Then I'm going to add the onions. Now I just want to give them a good stir so that none of them end up sticking to the bottom. I'm going to sprinkle them with just 1 teaspoon of sugar. And the idea is to kind of get the onions to sweat out some of their liquid. Just like when you add sugar to strawberries, it really makes the juices come out. This is going to be doing the same thing. It's going to give it a head start in the caramelizing of the onions. Now you want to do this at pretty slow pace, at like a medium-low heat. And it can take up to an hour. See how they're starting to get a little tan? But that's not enough. We really want to push it to get the deepest caramelized flavors that we can with this recipe. About another half an hour. This is what they look like. Look how the volume has been reduced so much. Alright, we're going to sprinkle them with a little bit of flour. Stir that in. And that's going to help be a little bit of a thickening agent when we add our broth. And I'm going to measure out my broth. We're going to be using 3 cups of it. Look at that great color just in the broth. That was with 8 hours of simmering. Now if you store your broth overnight in the fridge, you're going to get some of the fat to rise to the top, but that's good because then you can just take it off and get rid of it to help reduce the fat content in your final product. I'm going to measure out some thyme, just one of my favorite herbs. And we're going to let all those ingredients simmer together for another 30 minutes just to marry the flavors together. While it simmers, we can prepare the cheese for the top. I'm using a whole block of Swiss cheese here. Then I'm going to take our French baguette, cut 2 slices or however many bowls you're going to be using. And we're going to toast that with the broiler. You just want to get it lightly toasted, so keep a close eye on it. Now my soup is ready. Now you want to use oven-proof crocks, and specifically broiler-proof crocks. I'm kind of using bigger bowls here because it's just the 2 of us. You ladle your soup in and then you stick in your bread. I say push it down, let it soak up some of the broth. Then you want to cover the top with cheese. And they recommend using about half a cup for each serving. But it depends on the size of your bowls and how much cheese you feel comfortable with. We're going to stick these back in the oven under the broiler to let it brown up the top. Again, keep an eye on it. You don't want to burn the cheese. You just want to get it melted and lightly browned. So here we have it, our homemade French onion soup with homemade beef broth that I think everyone will love.